We're starting. Thank you very much for starting to send your questions in, and they are some excellent questions. Maybe Ralph is the right person to answer this question. Is it possible to reduce demand for coal and gas to provide process heating? Example, just snatch one out of thin air for milk powder drying plants.
Yes, well, there's other ways of providing heat nowadays. In terms of milk drying plants, Synlait Milk has already put in an electrothermal heat pump, a high temperature heat pump. And they've done that assuming a carbon price of $40 a tonne New Zealand coming along, and therefore it's cost effective. So in the past, these technologies have been too expensive to warrant it compared with the coal-fired boiler. And so that's one option. The other option, which is very controversial within the IPCC process at the moment, is the role of bioenergy. And because that's land use and deforestation and all the bad side of it, some of you might have seen this latest Michael Moore movie that's just come out, and it's totally out of date and totally biased against renewables. That's another story. But in terms of the bioenergy in New Zealand, we've got this vast resource of all the plantation forests that we're taking out the logs, and we're leaving behind maybe a third of the tree and all the residues, the branches, etc. And that is a resource that has been used in Scandinavia for many decades, since they had a carbon price 30 or 40 years ago in Sweden, for example. And that provides heat and power for communities and factories, and it's the sort of resource opportunity here in New Zealand, which has got employment prospects. It lies on the ground and rots and turns into carbon dioxide as it decomposes. So if we picked it up and then used it and collected it and burnt it for useful purposes, we still produce the carbon dioxide, but that gets absorbed by the next plantation of trees. And that's the sort of opportunity that Fonterra and a whole range of process heat plants in New Zealand, and schools. There's a lot of schools running on coal in the South Island. Several of those are moving towards biomass. Greenhouses is another example. There is a Bioenergy Association of New Zealand, which is actively pursuing these opportunities. So process heat doesn't have to come from coal or natural gas. It's just as efficient to come from electricity or bioenergy.
Thanks, Ralph. And you mentioned Michael Moore's film, Planet of the Humans, which has caused quite a stir. I mean, I've seen a lot of commentary about it online. I've never seen a film claiming environmental credentials get denounced so quickly by such a range of environmentalists. Would you like to give us your brief film review of Michael Moore's movie, just to put us all out of our misery?
Well, I've been around a long time, but when I first started watching it, I thought this is a very old movie, because they showed wind turbines that were at least 20 years old and totally out of date. And then I suddenly realized that it was actually quite a modern one using old shots. And they showed solar systems, which again were totally inefficient and very poor by today's standards. And then Janet actually mentioned biofuels. And they talked about tallow, and in fact, some biofuels are cost effective. Tallow esters are produced by Z Energy in New Zealand and added to their diesel as a form of biodiesel. So that's cost effective. That's where I started my career in 1973, producing biodiesel from tallow esters. But in this Michael Moore movie, they didn't just think about the residues from the meat processing plants, which is what tallow is. And inedible tallow, it can be used for soap and candles, so it's probably got a higher value now than it used to have, given the COVID requirement to wash your hands all the time. But they showed these shots of these dead animals going through a shredding machine, and it was gory, graphic stuff, and obviously set to turn the viewer away from any concept of what bioenergy might be. So if anybody watches it, maybe some people have seen it, but if you do watch it, just sort of take your blinkers off and question every statement that's made in this. There's some good points. I mean, it's not totally out of order, but it is a strong bias away from renewable energy as we know it today.
Yeah, interesting. Now, let me just pick up another question. So, Janet, back to you with this one, and one probably that you and Scott would both want to have say quite a bit about. So, what roles can households and communities play in getting to a zero carbon energy system? Janet first.
I will start there because I want to start with actually talking about flattening the curve. It's a phrase we've become very familiar with.
Yes, it is.
We know what flattening the curve means. It means actually changing what we do in order to remain within the constraints of what can be provided. And that's equally relevant to energy systems or electricity systems. The demand for New Zealand's electricity is driven by the peaks in household demand on a daily basis and on an annual basis. And this diagram, which I don't dare put into the slide share mode, shows typical demand in summer over the course of a day on the left-hand side, and typical household demand in over winter. This is total, with two very big peaks in the morning and in the evening. And it's that difference between summer and winter, and the difference between the peaks in the morning and the afternoon, which really drive the expensive infrastructure, the lines that we require, and particularly the generation. Mm. Now, this gets super important when we've got a future in which almost all of our generation comes from renewables, most of which will be very variable. So the ability to stay within that becomes very difficult if we've got an increasing demand. The place where we can control that is actually by controlling what households are doing, by engaging them in assisting them to reduce demand. And that's not actually, it sounds as if that means controlling people's lives. Well, here's some work that we've done looking at just putting in energy efficient light bulbs within houses leads to a 9% reduction in the winter peak of New Zealand's winter peak. That's a massive reduction. If we had highly energy efficient houses, if we went anywhere near Europe's plan, I'm just going to stop my screen share here so we can see each other. If we went anywhere near Europe's plan for near zero carbon houses by 2040, I think it is, whereby they're doing mass retrofits of households so that they're essentially not using very much electricity or energy at all, and are highly insulated, we would get a long way down the track as well in terms of reducing those peaks. And that would have a lot of co-benefits as well. So that's why households have a critical role in the zero carbon future, because they are the ones that are generating that peak, but also can assist with flattening the curve essentially to stay within what we are producing on the supply side. Over to you, Scott.
I'm sure Scott's going to have a word or two to say about that.
Yes, certainly. I think we've got an incredible potential with the member organisations that exist around the country, of the Community Energy Network, for example, who work in and of the community to shift the energy culture. And many of them are involved in insulation retrofits, so in improving the quality of housing and in providing education and information to communities, to individuals, to households, to families who are in energy hardship, but also increasingly are looking at ways to do whole of house retrofit and build renewables. So this is real stuff now, because a number of member organisations have put in shovel-ready projects to MB, to the Minister of Business, Innovation and Employment. For example, there's a solar farm proposal for a 4 megawatt solar farm at Raglan to then be distributed through smart grid to the community, generating a profit which can then be invested in insulation retrofits for the community. So we have a generation asset from community organisations around with a purpose of developing income to put back into community development to reduce energy hardship. Similarly, the work that I'm involved with through Blueskin Energy Limited, we have an application into the Provincial Growth Fund for the Blueskin Energy Network to take it beyond Otago and Southland and to share it all around the country. So this is the smart grid development that enables people to shift load, to get signals to shift load out of those peak times and earn rewards for doing that. We're in a growth phase, and we've had to drop some elements off it. But what we've seen over the past 2 years of working there is that people are when residents feel as though they have ownership or can participate in the energy system, they shift their habits. They take good signals and they take pleasure. It's essentially the gamification of energy, if you like, that it's fun to chase the energy dollar that then you can then get off your bill or give to social causes or environmental causes. It's fun to chase it if you've got the ability to do so. And typically residents don't have that, but we've got all that technology at our fingertips. So we have innovation happening in this household space and in the community space, and now we need to ensure that government has its eyes and ears open to that innovation and can join in partnership with that to make it happen.